On the 18th of December 1867, switchman James Maher was on duty at Angola Railroad Station in Angola, New York. On this wintry day, he watched as one train after another passed through the station and headed out onto a truss bridge crossing the nearby Big Sister Creek. At around 3:10 p.m, a passenger service from Cleveland passed through. James watched it go and noticed a spray of slush and ice from the wheels of the rearmost car. Realizing what this could mean, he started running as fast as he could after the train. He feared the worst, and his fears were, in just a few moments, about to be horrifically realized. The 1860s were an exciting time for the American railroad. The rail network had been established in the late 1820s and had expanded rapidly since then to cover much of the country. By 1867, the USA had laid more track than the whole of Europe. Train travel was accessible to all, and was something that most ordinary people experienced at some point, with many travelling by train on a very regular basis. At this time, trains were faster and carried more people than they ever had before, and they were more comfortable too. Many passenger cars now had padded seats, interior lighting in the form of kerosene lamps, and even heating powered by stoves or boilers. At the same time, train travel in 1867 was not by any means comfortable by modern standards. Most passenger cars were made of wood and were extremely loud and rattly. Train lines were often ill-repaired and were a mixture of different gauges, meaning that long journeys often required dozens of changes, as well as much waiting around while engines took on board fresh water and fuel. Accidents on the railroad were fairly common. That bridges sometimes collapsed and trains sometimes derailed was an unpleasant but accepted fact of life. On the 18th of December 1867, a train departed from Cleveland's Union Depot at around 6:40 a.m., bound for Buffalo, New York. The train consisted of 4 passenger cars and 4 baggage cars, and carried around 200 passengers in total. Despite the snowy conditions outside, passengers were kept warm by a coal-powered stove situated at one end of each passenger car, and had the flickery, dim light of kerosene lamps to see by. It was close to Christmas, and many passengers were travelling home or to visit relatives. Despite this, the prevailing mood on board was one of frustration. The scenery was dull, the cars uncomfortable and stuffy. There was little room to move, with the luggage racks jammed full of packages and gifts. As the journey went on, the train made stop after stop to take on new passengers, and reload with water and fuel. Little delays at each stop added up over time, and the service fell gradually behind schedule. By the time it reached Angola, it was almost 3 hours late. At the front of the train, the driver pushed the engine a little harder than usual in an effort to make up time. The train wasn't due to stop in Angola and passed through at a rapid pace, around 48 kilometers or 30 miles per hour, close to its top speed. It slowed a little as it approached the bridge over Big Sister Creek, not far past Angola Station. The bridge was narrow and had to be taken slowly, especially in this icy weather. Switchman James Maher watched from Angola Station as the train passed through. He was a little surprised by its speed, but much more worried when he observed a plume of ice spraying from the rear wheels of the final car, a sight that could indicate something was wrong, or perhaps even that the car was partially derailed. As the train's whistle sounded, indicating that it was slowing down for the bridge, James Maher took off running after it as fast as he could, convinced that he was about to witness a serious accident. The train slowed but did not stop before the bridge. Snow, ice, and chunks of wood from gouged sleepers were now ejecting from the rearmost wheels as it sped out onto the precarious railway truss bridge. James was still pursuing the train when it entered the bridge. He saw the engine at the front make it almost all the way across to the other side before, with a screech, the rearmost car swayed, tipped to one side, and fell 15 meters, or 50 foot, into the creek below. Inside this car, some passengers managed to brace themselves and remain in their seats, but most were thrown violently to the rear, where the stove was situated. As the car landed on the icy creek bed, it crumpled into a mess of tangled wreckage, pinning around 50 passengers inside. As the final car crashed down into the creek bed, the second-to-last passenger car, now destabilized, also derailed. It swayed, tipped, and fell from the other side of the bridge, landing on its side on an icy embankment on the far side of the creek. This violent fall caused horrific injuries to those inside. Passengers were crushed or pinned in place, lost limbs, and received terrible blunt force injuries. One man, Josiah Hayward, was caught in the wreckage and cut in half. He had been wary to travel that day, after having experienced a recurring dream in which a monk told him he would die. Occupants of the second-to-last car who survived the fall were able to crawl out of the car and await rescue. The same was not true for those in the final carriage. As well as enduring a longer fall, the crash had smashed the kerosene lamps on board and caused the stove to spill its coals. Now the wreckage of the final car burst into flames. Collapsed against the support of the bridge, the crushed car acted like a chimney, drawing in air to feed the flames. 3 survivors were able to extricate themselves. The rest were either too badly injured, or trapped by wreckage or the bodies of their fellow passengers. They burned as the car was consumed by flames. Many of them burned alive and conscious. The first rescuers to arrive on scene reported screams lasting for 5 minutes following the crash. Switchman James Mahar and others, having raced to the scene at the first sign of smoke, doubtless wished to help if they could, but this was difficult. They could reach the second-to-last car by undertaking a perilous climb partway down a snowy embankment, but the final car was almost completely inaccessible. They eventually formed a human chain to climb down to it, and shoveled snow onto the wreckage to damp down the flames, with little effect. Most people who were trapped in the final car did not survive. Even in the second-to-last car, many of those who did survive received such grave injuries that they could not be saved. One man, Alexander Fisher, crawled from the wreckage and hobbled to a nearby home. He collapsed, gasped out a description of his loved ones, including his sister-in-law and her baby, and implored the residents to go and look for them. He insisted that they should leave him. "With me, all is well," he said. They were his final words. His sister-in-law was found in the wreckage, very seriously injured, but with no sign of her baby. It wasn't until hours later that the infant was found. She was wrapped in blankets and had been mistaken for a piece of luggage and passed over by rescuers several times before she awoke and started to cry. She was uninjured and survived. In total, the accident took the lives of 49 travellers, many of whom were burned beyond recognition in the fire that consumed the final car. An inquiry followed, seeking to establish the cause of the crash. It revealed a number of possible contributing factors. First, the train had been travelling relatively fast for that section of railroad in order to make up time. This alone, while inadvisable, would not have caused a derailment. It was found that one axle at the rear of the final car had been slightly deformed. This had combined with a slight irregularity in a joint in the track that had been repaired just that morning. Each of these irregularities had been so slight that they had not been noted even during close inspections. But when the two met, the jolt that resulted was sufficient to partially derail the final car, starting a swaying motion that, when it reached the bridge, became a complete, disastrous derailment. The inquiry found that the railway was not responsible, as the defects had been so minor that they could not reasonably have been detected. All relevant inspections had been performed. This final result led to a great outcry. As the Buffalo Patriot and Journal wrote, "The same thing might happen at any moment to any train upon any other road in the United States." There was a great deal of media coverage of the disaster, coming as it did just a few years after the end of the Civil War, at a time when people thought that safety and security and stability had returned. It shook the nation. Newspapers were quick to refer to it as the Angola Horror, and to publish graphic drawings of the burned victims. These same burned victims were put on display in Buffalo, in an effort to allow friends and family to identify them. Such was the profile of the disaster, however, that thousands of unrelated people arrived to seek entrance and view the bodies, to verify lurid newspaper accounts for themselves. Ultimately, many victims were identified not by an inspection of their bodies, but by their luggage and possessions. Items found included a surveyor's staff, a pair of ice skates, bunches of keys, jewellery, and a book with $50 tucked into the pages for safekeeping. These items were enough to allow families to identify all but 17 of the victims. A memorial service was held in Buffalo's Exchange Street Station, attended by more than 10,000 people. In the months that followed, public pressure led to a number of changes across the railroads of the United States. Many railroad companies stopped locking doors on trains in transit, and started keeping better records of passengers on board each train. In addition to this, the disaster hastened the adoption of the newly invented air brake, which could stop trains much more quickly and reliably than the manual chain brakes that were in use at the time. The accident also contributed to the standardization of track gauges across the network, and the steady phasing out of wooden cars in favour of metal ones. In 2015, more than 100 years after this accident transformed the country's railway networks, a memorial to the 17 victims who remained unidentified was established in Buffalo, where the victims are buried in Forest Lawn Cemetery.